Hi there and welcome to the Team 14 Rugby, the global rugby community, and we're bringing you rugby based on passion, integrity and respect. And today we have Eddie O'Sullivan in the shed, all the way from Ireland, 3 Triple Crowns, long-serving Irish coach and a legend of our game. Hello, Eddie.
Hi guys, how you doing?
Eddie, how's it going? We're in the middle of Six Nations, and thankfully we've got access to your brain and hopefully a little insider of what it's like, what the whole Six Nations experience is like from the inside, other than us looking from the outside as fans. And
Sure.
Eddie, could you tell us a little bit about your experience as a head coach in the Six Nations and how it's different to, say, World Cups or November Test Series? And because we hear various coaches talking about, they're looking at the draw, the home and away setup, the run-in and building of momentum and all that. It seems to be a unique experience as a tournament. It must be unique as a coach.
Well, I think for most of the teams in the Six Nations, the benchmark is their Six Nations for the year. You have your summer tour. It often slips off the radar in this part of the world when we go down under, because it's the end of the rugby season and people are kind of diverting into other sports, especially in Ireland. Gaelic sports become front and centre. Yeah. So the June tests don't resonate as much unless maybe you have a big result. And then the autumn tests are more of entertainment based. Teams come up and you have a rattle at them. But the Six Nations is kind of the benchmark for your season. So if you have a good Six Nations, it means an awful lot. Plus the finances around that. It's a money-making exercise for the unions as well. It's very important. Like you take the Irish rugby team, the way it's structured, I think the turnover for Irish rugby is about 80 million a year, euros in total. And I think at the moment the Irish team are responsible for raising something like north of 85% of that money.
Oh, wow.
When I was there, it was over 90%. The provinces in Ireland have kind of got more traction themselves now, but it's still a huge amount of money. Like all that pressure's on the national team to deliver.
Wow.
So sponsorship and all that. So it's a huge time of the year. It's a very unique competition. Obviously, I know it's Six Nations now, but it was 5 nations since Adam was a boy. And the fixture lists, like they move them around in terms of when you play, but the actual format doesn't change. Like for example, Ireland. It makes a big difference, but every other year we play France and England away, which is a massive challenge. That means to win a Grand Slam, you've got to win in Twickenham and Paris in the same year. And then you've got Wales, Scotland and Italy at home. So if you look at it this year, this would not be the best year for Ireland to try and win a Grand Slam. They've got to go to Paris, they've got to go to Twickenham. Now, they've been to Paris and they've won, but Twickenham is waiting at the end of the season. And then you've got Wales coming to town. So it's a hard year. It's the even years. It's actually probably easier to win a championship in the odd years because you get England and France in Dublin, and then you kind of back yourself going to Cardiff and going to Edinburgh. Now that's not easy either, but it's funny how that makes a difference. And then the fixture list, the momentum side of it is if you lose the first game of the championship, you feel you're in catch-up straight away, and everyone gets restless, and it just puts extra pressure on the team. And the tournament is so condensed, like The Six Nations is 5 games in 7 weeks, so there's hardly time to take a breath. So you get into that that bubble for like 2 months, and it's just you don't come up for air again until it's over. It's intoxicating. It's incredibly challenging, but it's a fantastic experience, exhilarating, and I think it's the time of the year for a coach in this part of the world in the Northern Hemisphere where you're really batten down the hatches and you go for it because. If you pull off something special, it's a piece of history. Grand Slams are getting harder and harder to win, and for that reason, it's a great time of the year.
And that's incredible insight to say, particularly the bit about losing the first game. You're in catch-up mode. Like, how difficult is that? So if you're a coach and you've got vast experience in the Six Nations, that's probably a bit easier to handle. But someone like Gregor Townsend is a new Test coach. He loses that first match with a performance the Welsh probably wouldn't have been too proud about. The Scottish wouldn't have been too proud about. And then he's playing catch-up football. And like, how does that, that must play on his mind?
Well, it's funny. People asked me last week, to predict how the outcomes. I actually got them right. I said England would choke the life out of, England would choke the life out of Wales. We'd give Italy a hiding. And I said Scotland would beat France because if Scotland lost last weekend at Edinburgh, the wheels were going to come off because they had really had a great autumn. Gregor in charge, everybody was upbeat. and there was huge talk coming into the championship, and then they tanked in Cardiff, and they really were under pressure to deliver a performance, and they got there in the end. I don't think France were that good, to be honest, but they had to win. The pressure of winning sometimes, more than anything, is worse than the team facing you. But I think Gregor, I said this after the game in Cardiff, and Gregor's a fantastic coach. He's got a great vision for the game, and we saw that when he coached Glasgow to win what was the Pro 12 championship, and they won it fantastic style of rugby. It was really top drawer. They played just breathtaking rugby, but his adjustment now is going up and trying to, I suppose, transplant that style of rugby into Test rugby. And you know what? It's not easy. It's a different place, and the difference is kind of not difficult. The difference is that you really at Test level. Anyone who's played Test level will tell you that it's just the pressure of time and space is different. You don't get the same time on the ball. You don't get the same space. Those gaps that look so inviting at Pro 14 or even Champions Cup are not that inviting at Test level. Like you get crushed in them. And I think maybe he was a little over-ambitious going to Cardiff, that he was going to just grip it and rip it and let it play from everywhere. And I think he learned a harsh lesson that, if that doesn't stick on the day, you can have a really bad day out. I think he had to recalibrate last weekend. And I think he did on the best that he had to get a result. And I think that's part of the learning curve. You have these vision in your mind as a coach, which every coach has to have that vision of how you want the game to play. It's a great game in that you don't have to play the same way as everybody else. And part of it is your philosophy on the game, your style of rugby, and then trying to mesh your players into that because, they've got to deliver it. So if they don't have the skill set, it doesn't matter what your vision is. But I think Gregor was looking at Scotland and thinking, I can, deliver this again at the top end. And he can probably eventually, but there's a process in it. And I think he got maybe knocked back a bit in Cardiff. So it'll be interesting to see when he comes to Dublin now, where there's a game that they would probably like to cut the straps loose against Ireland and see how Ireland managed that. But I think he's got to recalibrate a little bit, and that's part of the learning process.
If this learning process, Eddie, you had a huge number of years with Ireland, then you've also coached the United States at Test level. So we have Gregor up there with his first year around the traps at Test level. And then we've got Gatland and Eddie Jones, who've got multiple years. Say from your own experience, your first Six Nations to your last. Yeah. In a kind of a cliche question, can you kind of sum up your greatest learnings, exiting as a senior international head coach compared to that green guy you were when you first got the job as
Yeah, it's about, it's multifactorial. It comes down to a lot of preparation, actually. That people see, you play 10 test games a year and people go, your golf handicap must be fantastic. You must be playing golf every week. And, there's nothing further from the truth, you do a huge amount of unseen work in between your blocks. But when those blocks arrive, they're ultra pressure. That kind of 8 weeks you get for the Six Nations, that four weeks you get in November. The other time you get 3 or 4 weeks in the summer. They're very compressed. So preparation is actually huge. So when the coach sits down at the front end of the championship, they've got so much stuff already lined up. They've got their game plans as they see them, lined up for different teams. They've got their selections lined up. Now, all those things can throw into disarray. Don't get me wrong. You lose a game, you get injuries, things change. But you have a starting point. I always tell people, it's better to have a plan, and if it goes wrong, you can fix it, rather than have no plan and make it up as you go along. So you would find that these coaches at that level, you've got a mountain of work done at the front end. And then it's all about efficiency after that. It's about efficiency in the limited time you have with your players, the limited turnaround times, which now in the Six Nations can be 6 days. Yeah. Italy played England in Rome, and then they had to pitch up to Dublin. So away from home in 6 days, a travel day in the middle of that, a recovery day. Suddenly, a rest day, you're down to 2 days prep, where you can really go out and train. So all that has to be factored in before the championship kicks off. And your efficiency in those windows of getting the message to the players, getting the adjustments, getting the fixes in, that's the biggest pressure. You've such a limited window to make the adjustments that you undoubtedly will have to make as the tournament progresses. And so being organised at the front end of that is almost crucial. Without that, you're like really asking for trouble. And I think you'd find when you've been through a few championships, you get better at organising that front end as well, because you have a better feel for what could go wrong. You know, every coach, the thing they hate most is surprises. You know, you think about it.
Yeah.
You're like, the last thing you want is a surprise. You know, so like, for that reason, you put a lot of stock in getting ready and getting prepared, and then being very efficient with your staff, your medical, your coaching, your S&C, your selections, your communication with the players, your game plans, your players setting their KPIs. You know, there's a myriad of things to be done. So, as I said, it's just dealing with that the stress of the time and the pressure within the windows you have to get. And all it's about then is going out on the day, and the lads just giving the best performance of their lives on that day, if they can. That's the whole point of the exercise, like playing out of their skin for 80 minutes. And that's all. And everything's judged on that, as you know.
Can you enjoy?
If that goes well.
Can you enjoy that 80 minutes, Eddie? Can you like?
No, usually you don't. And it's not that you're sitting there like miserable. It's just that you're so bloody busy.
Yeah.
You're constantly recalibrating, getting information in. You're working your socks off. Like, there was a time, as we all know, back in the day when the coach had no access to the team. He couldn't even talk to them at half time. Yeah. Like, young people would laugh at you when you hear that now. Like, you couldn't get on the field, and if you were bouncing in a message, you could be shot at dawn, you know. So, like, that's changed now. So you're actually actively working with your staff and feeding information in. Come to half time, you're trying to get your half time bullet points together. Like, you know, you can probably give 4 or 5 messages at half time. If you do 6 or 7, you know, fellas won't remember them. Right. And then what they make mistake, if you're going to give, we say, in kind of terms of their importance, the trouble, if you start with the most important one, they'll probably remember the least important one. That's the last one you gave them. So there's all that.
And that's all experience, getting that stuff across, isn't it?
Yeah, you learn. And half time, you know, trying to manage that space at half time, whether things are going well or they're not going well. It's much easier if they're going well, but if they're not going well, you're actually making adjustments to fix things that you've seen. So, like, experience is great in that. The more you do that, the kind of the better you get at it. And I suppose you can't buy that. You've got to just go through it and learn as you go. But it's a pretty steep learning curve, because, as a famous American coach said to a player once, I'm not right all the time, and if I'm not, you don't have to worry about it. I won't be here long, you know.
Yeah.
So, and I guess, Eddie, with like, this is incredible insight into the mind of the coach, and particularly the enjoyment of the game and stuff. And you only get the team for a certain period of time per year when you're the international coach. I guess that would make an enormous difference if, for example, you're the club coach of them, when you get such a long period with the players. That must be a huge change as well in the mentality. Yeah,
it's probably if you're, for me, I'm a coach. I love coaching. I love being on the grass, you know, with grass under my feet. I love that. So that's the one thing you kind of get squeezed out of as an international coach, because you've got 10 games in the year and everything else is about prepping for those. So when you get into the club game, you get that access almost every day, you know, and that's great too. Now, I think the challenge around that is keeping that fresh.
Yeah.
You know, because it can become like Groundhog Day. It can become like the hamster on the treadmill. And maybe you get on a bad run and you've got to do something to catalyze a change, or you're on a good run and you want to keep everything bubbling. So I think it's a different challenge. You definitely have more time to make your adjustments, but probably the challenge is more about keeping everything fresh and keeping everybody pointing in the same direction for a longer period of time. Because international tournaments like the Six Nations, like, it's just guys hit the ground running, and I said you don't take a breath on it's over, and it's a completely different dynamic.
So that kind of intensity, Eddie, you're talking about players coming in, hitting the ground running, and, you know, around social media and pundits and fans alike, they'll be discussing selection coming up to these tournaments, you know. Yeah. And Larmour in Leinster would get a lot of attention, and maybe Steph Evans over in Wales, lads that are on fire at Pro 14 level. Johnny Sexton said recently, he had a quote about test level exposing players' weaknesses. So as a coach, looking at these guys coming up the ranks, can you tell us a little bit about the player and the difference between what you know as a test animal, if we're going to call it that, and a guy that's a Pro 14 level? Like Rob Kearney seems to have his name on that jersey no matter what challenger comes along. So there's a lot of There's a lot of expectation that he meets for Joe Schmidt. Can you touch on that?
It's one of the big conundrums for a coach at international level, because no matter what you say, to step up from the club game, even at the top end of the club game, like Champions Cup or even Super Rugby, to step up into the test arena, and look, like, it's called Test Rugby for a reason. You're about to be tested like never before. The big conundrum for a coach is when you decide to pick a player at test level, the burning question for you, is he ready to play?
Yeah.
And there's a punt in it. There is a punt in it. You can never say, without a shadow of a doubt, this guy is ready, because we've seen guys who you would have thought were ready struggle in their first, that's happened. And they come back from sometimes, and sometimes they don't. And then other guys who you would thought, might struggle, and they've hit the straps, So there's no 100%. There's an element of, I suppose, gauging. And the only way you get that is when you get guys into camp and you work with them. And what you try and do is, say somebody like Larmour, who to me was outstanding this year for Leinster. The guy is, and the one thing I'd say at the moment as well, while you're seeing these younger guys break in, is that the academies are so efficient in terms of their S&C and their development, that you get guys like Larmour, who's 20, who looks like he could be 25. Like, when you see, I was doing some work last week with at the under-20 game, Ireland against Italy, and some of those young lads, they're 20 years of age. If you look at the under-20 teams that I coached going back nearly 20 years ago, they look like just guys who just come out of school.
Yeah.
These under-20s look like guys that could play professionally in the morning. So the S&C element of the academies is really delivering. So at the moment, a lot of these guys look like they can play. But what would happen is someone like Larmour, he goes into camp, and then, funnily enough, the standard, because you've got so many good players in one place, the challenges in camp are a little higher than training with his club. And you begin maybe to see his strengths and weaknesses there that mightn't get exposed at club level. And you get a feel for the guy, how he carries himself, what his energy levels are like, what his confidence level are like around the camp. And, you kind of make an opinion based on all that, getting to know the fella. And then you say, right, his time is right, and you let him in there, and you cross your fingers a little bit and hope he's ready. You'd never put a guy in unless you thought he was ready, but you can't be 100% sure. And, the one thing I say when people talk about selections, and I'd be very slow to criticise a coach's selection. And the reason I say that is very simple, is he has more information than I have.
Yeah.
He's actually on the ground with the guy every day. He's working with him day on, day out. He has a much better insight on how this player is ticking at the moment. So for someone to say, he should have picked such a guy, or he should drop him, or he's a better guy, that's fine to have an opinion, but I would always bow to the coach having more information than me. And like that, to me, when you see someone like Larmour, people screaming for him to get picked, I think Schmidt, has dealt with Larmour as he sees best for Larmour. And you have to respect that. And there's no doubt Larmour will get a bundle of caps, but it's when you start him on that pathway. And he started already. But I think that's a big conundrum, because there's always some young bolter comes out and people are shouting for him to get his first cap. And I think that's great, but you kind of a duty of care with that kid, that you put him in there at the right time so he's the best chance of succeeding. And if you steer him the wrong way, it can damage a guy and you might never recover from it. So there's a lot goes into it, and I think coaches, at the end of the day, you have to have the most information. So I'd be reticent to criticise coaches for not picking guys, because you have to say they have more information than the guys who are criticising them.
That's a really interesting point about the duty of care, because in other sports down here in New Zealand, we've seen young players come in, not in rugby, but back in the day in other sports, young guys, up-and-coming talents, play the game and they've never come back because they were too early, or there was too much pressure on them or something. That's really interesting.
You see, if you think about it, sorry, cutting you off there, Steve, is that this kid is an asset down the track if you manage him well. This kid could have 50 caps or 60 caps or 70 caps. But if you shove him in too early, you wreck his confidence. He may never rehabilitate from that. He may come back somewhat, and you've done him a disservice. You've really done him a disservice. So, and you're never 100% sure. But I'm saying is that's why you see a lot of coaches, like the old saying, measure twice and cut once.
Yeah.
And that's why you do that, because you're thinking down the track here for this guy. You want to give him the best chance of succeeding in his career, and that's a factor in it.
Eddie, if we're talking about these young players up and coming and the bright stars, like you yourself, you were around the scene when Brian O'Driscoll was coming through, and as an international test coach, and you see this bright guy like Larmour or O'Driscoll, can you get your hands on and develop that player, or do you have to kind of cross your fingers and hope they come through? Because you only get a certain amount of windows.
Yeah.
If you see something special that you want to get your hands on, can you?
No, it's not really possible as an international coach to change the trajectory of a player's skill set substantially. Certainly when you get them into camp, you can work with them on certain things, you can upskill them in certain ways, but you're kind of fine-tuning to a certain extent, you know. But you have to remember that to get into camp, they have to do a lot of things right anyway. You know, so they're probably not far off the finished product. You know, lack experience, they might have a weakness in their game, and you can help them with that. But in terms of fixing, like developing a skill is like, you know, getting stronger. It takes time. You know, there's a process of improving your skill set. There's a whole pedagogy around it. So when you get guys in, your time is so limited that you can tinker and you can fine tune them and you can give them advice. And you would, a lot of it's advice, like, you know, I was always, for players who come into camp, you would profile their performances in the games. You profile their performances before they come in. You would build a matrix of their skill set in their build up to the championship, and then you'd continue to build that matrix in their skill set across the championship. And all that was giving them feedback of areas that they had to work on. And that also swung into the mental preparation side for them, because then they could take that information, which was hard information, you know, how many carries they made, how many tackles they made, how many rucks they cleaned out, and the quality of those executions. And they could set their key performance indicators for games around that. So they knew going into a test game what their goals were, measurable goals in terms of their performance. And guys just come back after a game and they'd look at their matrix and they'd say, like, they'd know where they had kind of not delivered or where they had delivered. And that was really useful in terms of giving guys indicators as to where they need to work on their game. And a lot of that work was when they went back to their clubs. They would focus on that stuff. And a lot of it was tell them what they had to do to stay in the team. And it helped them to set their goals as well from performance to performance. And it's not woolly-minded stuff. It's not kind of, you know, general vague chit-chat. It's hard facts.
Yeah.
Like you would link all those particular metrics into videos. Like you could see if you made a big tackle, an impact tackle, you could see that and you see how you got your mechanics right. If you missed a tackle, you could see how you got your mechanics wrong. Yeah. And if you had a flaw in your mechanics, you would go back and fix that in training. So that tackle count was more productive. Like if you're in a position to make a tackle and you don't make it, maybe your mechanics are off or you made a bad read. So all that is, so you can give them a lot of information and help them, but the process of fixing those things, you mightn't have the time in your hands. They may have to go back to their clubs to do it, but it's valuable information for them in terms of them becoming better at what they do.
Brilliant.
It's I guess that's what the work-ons are when we hear people say, oh, they've got work-ons to go away. They're based on these metrics. Another thing that fascinates me about the selection process of international coaches, how does that process work? Do you have certain positions you look at first that I've got to get someone in that position because they're going to fit this game plan, or?
Well, what you do is when you're building your squad is you're trying to build a depth chart around each position, and you're hoping to build a depth chart of 3 people in each position, and that takes time and there's risks involved in that, because part of building that depth chart is maybe putting someone on the field that you're not sure they can make it, but you have to find out. And ironically, in this part of the world, the autumn internationals is often the time where you get to roll the dice on that. You rarely get a chance to roll the dice in the Six Nations. There's too much at risk to take a punt on someone. But going back to that performance matrix is when you're building the profile of your squad, you would basically you would code all their games with their club in the big games, the Champions Cup games and stuff, and you would build a matrix, and then you would see when guys are coming into camp who's your best 3 back rows in terms of performance, who's your best second rows, who are your best centres. Like it's not as complicated as you think. And by the way, you know, usually the guys that were starting last autumn were probably pretty close to the best guys as well come to Six Nations, you know. Yeah. And when you have guys like O'Driscoll or Darcy or O'Gara, O'Connell, O'Callaghan, and the list goes on, that those guys deliver all consistently. But if some other young buck wants to break into that company, he's got to start hitting those similar type of performances and numbers. And now you'll be saying to him, this is where you need to be to get into the shake-up here. But you can profile your squad based on their performances like that, pretty much again, and you'll find the guys who are delivering best for you. And again, when you sit down with those guys, and it's often with the guys who don't make the team or don't make the squad, they go, hey, why am I not in? You say, well, here's what you got to fix here. I've had that discussion with a number of players, and within 6 months or a year, they've broken into the squad because they've fixed the things that were keeping them out of it.
Brilliant.
And it's tangible stuff. It's kind of like, you need to get more. You need to make more tackles. You need to make more of an impact at the breakdown on defense. You need to put yourself in over the ball more. They're all tangibles. It's not willy-nilly wavy stuff. Oh, you need to play better. That means nothing.
Yeah.
This is what you have to do. So when you give them that kind of specific feedback, they can go away and fix that. And a good number of players, like, it's probably not fair to mention them, but they didn't make the squad, gave them that feedback, came back and kind of were fixtures in the squad for a number of years, you know.
Do you get a feeling during the week, Eddie, like let's say, for example, Scotland were well beaten by Wales down there and they turned it around in a week, and us as fans are kind of looking at it and saying that has to be a mental issue. The whole team looked so flat. Do you ever get a feeling during the week that this is flat? And if you do, how do you change it? Or how did
you know things are flat? Well, training can be a bit flat, but maybe not a lot of mistakes. But my barometer for where the team were mentally a lot of the time was you go down to dinner or lunch and you stand outside the dining room and listen. And you hear all the banter going on inside and the crack and the messing and the shouting and the laughing. And you go, yeah, we're in a good place, you know.
All right.
Or on the bus going to training, fellas are getting slagged, or they have, they got to get up and sing even though they don't want, You get that energy around the team when everyone's in a good place. And, when things are in a bad place, the bus is quiet, the dining room is quiet, and you've got to re-energise that. That's a kind of a different thing in a way. That's trying to get guys to re-energise themselves in terms of picking themselves up if they're down a bit. The other side of it is that in terms of if you lose a game, you're beaten on a Saturday, you review the game Saturday night, Sunday morning, and then you sit down with the team for the first team meeting after a loss. The most important thing at that moment is you give them a plan of fixes. You give them a plan to fix what went wrong. Okay. That's what you do as a head coach. So you sit down with the team and you go through the game, and it's not very specific. It's very generalized. You pick out, maybe, if it depends how bad the performance was, maybe 4 or 5 things. So sometimes it's 3 or 4 things. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 things, and you show them where things went wrong. This is what went wrong. Was it systemic? Was it we just didn't follow through on what we said we'd do? Was it carelessness? Whatever it was it sloppiness? Whatever it was. You show them the 3 or 4 things that have caused the problems in the previous game. And you show them and say, I guarantee you, and you know this, if we fix those, we can win the next game. And they all go, yeah, of course we can. These are all things we can fix. And if we fix those, we're going to win the next game. And that automatically flips the switch. And guys are jumping out of their seats to go back, train and get out in the field and implement these fixes that are going to bring them to a better place. It's funny, I was listening to Donegal Callan there recently. He's just retired at the end of the season, and he was talking about, and his thing was that he just wanted, the motivation to win was not so much to win, but to avoid the gut-wrenching feeling of losing. Yeah. To keep away from the dips, Yeah. And when you have a dip, you've got to show guys a way out of it. You've got to show them, look, here's what we do to fix it. And it's amazing when guys see 3 or 4 things that they know are in their control. They're all fixables. We get out in the field here, we train our socks off, we fix them, the next performance is going to be better.
Brilliant.
It's that simple, really, provided you pick the right things. The right things.
It all sounds like it's straightforward, but it's not, like to manage this. But one of the biggest bits I don't get looking in from the outside of the Six Nations is this home and away advantage, disadvantage. You touched on it to start with. With Ireland, it's easier, or not easier, but you've got more chance of potentially winning a Grand Slam if you're not having to play certain teams away from home. And this, can you lead some insight?
Like in a professional era, why is home and away still so valid?
Yeah.
Well, it's still valid in every sport.
Yeah.
It's very hard, and it's the truth of the matter is the the environment and the atmosphere in a stadium has a bearing on the home team. Like, probably the team that I always hated playing away from home in my time were Wales. Like, in my time, Wales came to Dublin. We used to beat them relatively comfortably in Dublin.
Yeah.
But when they got into Cardiff and they got under that dome, under that roof, I mean, when they got to close the roof, it was just electric. The electric atmosphere, they fed off that.
Yeah.
And there is that, and guys in Lansdowne Road, at home, you get that extra little bit of energy, that extra, you feel that kind of half-inch taller, kilo heavier, and a little more energy, and that's the reality of it. It's an unquantifiable and it's an imponderable, but it's a fact that guys are more energized in front of their own supporters. And you can say, oh, it's professional and that, but they are humans as well. These guys are humans; they're not machines. And you get the sense going into another stadium that it's that little bit harder. And in a game of tight margins, if you're going to win a game by 20 points or 30 points, that's not a factor. But if it's going to be a 2-point game, that might be the difference. There've been games I believe I've won with Ireland in Dublin that have the crowd have played a big part in it. Our first win over South Africa in 2004, I thought the crowd that day have kept us at the game. We were had our heels on the goal line for the last 5 minutes, and it was just wave after wave of Springboks coming, and without the crowd we wouldn't have held them out. That's a fact. I know that. And then the other side of it, if you can go to a hostile environment and get a result, the value to the team of that is huge. If you can go to Twickenham and get a result, or even to Cardiff, that really energises the team. Particularly in the championship, if you're away from home and you can get a win away from home, man, that's just like really gives you energizes. Provided, okay, winning in Rome isn't as energizing as winning in Twickenham. Let's be honest about it.
Yeah.
But look at Murrayfield. Like, my first trip to Murrayfield was way back 2003, and we beat Scotland in the Six Nations. It was Ireland's first win in Murrayfield for 19 years.
That's mad, isn't it?
Isn't it crazy? I think Fergus Slattery was playing when they last won there.
Wow.
It's like, and you're talking about Paul O'Connell, Brendan Driscoll. That was 19 years. I think it was around that time. Or was it 18 or 19 years? It was a ridiculous amount of time. But it's funny. I know it's a good question. Professional era. What difference does it make? I got to tell you, lads, it does. It makes a difference, and it's an imponderable, but it's a fact. You can dice it any way you want.
Those greats you had on your ranks, Eddie, and you had a plethora of them, like Paul O'Connell, Brian O'Driscoll, and then say your playmaker was O'Gara. Can you tell us a bit about the relationship the head coach has with his captain and his playmaker? Is that a completely different special thing?
It's a different thing. It's because it's not just your captain. Like, when I came on board as head coach in Ireland, Keith Wood was the captain.
Yeah.
Now, he was coming near the end of his career and he had quite a bit of injuries. He wasn't captain. He had to drop out of the captaincy. He was injured from my first couple of championships, and then he got back for the World Cup, and then he retired in 2003. And Brian O'Driscoll was in the hot seat as like a rookie at that stage, but he knew Woody was coming back. But to that extent, one of the first things Woody asked me to do was, like, at that stage, he was kind of the only voice on the team, really. He was kind of the one guy talking all the time. He was talking at training, talking in the team room, and he felt, and he was right, we needed to build a senior player group.
Yeah.
And we did that. We built some senior player group of 5 or 6 guys with the captain. And they're kind of they're your consigliere, You talk to them a lot. They come to you with problems. And it's all pretty mundane stuff. Like, if they might come to me after training and say, like, what are we going to do more rucking tomorrow because I thought today we could have done with more rucking.
Yeah.
Or they might say, look, that session went on a bit long. Fella's legs are a bit heavy. They feel, can we clip it shorter tomorrow? I might go to them and say, like, we didn't train well today. What's going on? Why are we not kind of hitting the straps today?
Yeah.
Like, that's or it could be simple stuff like, Eddie, the pasta was cold for dinner last night. Guys are giving out, Like, it's day-to-day stuff, It's funny. But you have that rapport with them. And if a player is not happy and some players can be a bit, younger players may be intimidated to go into the head coach, and they might have, they might want to go to one of the assistant coaches. They can go to the senior player and say, look, I'm not happy about this, or I want to talk to the coach, or there's something bothering me, and they're kind of your they're lieutenants, and your communication with them, your interface with them, is really important on a day by day. And it doesn't mean that you're in their ear and you don't know everything about their lives, but in terms of the business, they're giving you feedback, you're giving them feedback. And it's criticism of me because they're saying, hey, that session was too long, you need to cut the session. And you've got to take that on board. Because the worst thing you can have in that situation is yourself and 5 or 6 players and everyone's telling each other how great they are. That's a bad outcome. You know, everyone's yes man. You need to have that relationship where they can challenge you in what they're thinking, and you can challenge them. As for the betterment of everybody. So if you don't build that core of leaders in the team, and then what happens is if O'Driscoll gets injured, or if Wood gets injured, or if O'Connell gets injured, there's not a vacuum. There's other guys there who can take up the strands.
That selection of Brian O'Driscoll as captain, Eddie, at that time, I don't know if he'd even captained a club side or a school team.
No, he hadn't. So,
and you put him, and he was on fire. Like obviously, every Irish fan saw him as he was a god for us, really, in a sporting sense. And you decided to give him the captaincy as well. Were you pretty confident at how that would turn out, or what way?
It's funny, it's a big decision to make because it's captain of his country, and it's a historical thing, really.
Yeah.
You go into the history books, and I just think I saw the leadership qualities in him, and the leadership qualities I saw, and you'd see in a captain is, firstly, there were huge respect from his peers. You know, and the second thing then was he was a guy that's probably going to be in the team all the time, so your captain's around, and then 3. You had a good relationship with him, and he was honest with you, and he would tell you what he thought, even though you mightn't particularly like what he's going to tell you. And for that takes leadership and strength to that. So that kind of combination of guys looking up to him, being a really good player, and then having the honesty of dialogue with me, that I was comfortable with him and he was comfortable with me. And I remember telling him when I asked him to do the job, I don't want to be your friend. I want to be your coach. It's a subtle difference. We weren't bosom buddies. We weren't meeting for lattes, when he weren't in camp. We weren't great friends. But he was a really brilliant captain. And I saw that in him at the time. And there was a lot of criticism because he was so young, that he wouldn't have the experience or the gravitas. But, you got to go with your gut on these occasions. And I was lucky. I had Keith Wood. I had Brian O'Driscoll, Paul O'Connell. I kind of lucked out in terms of personnel,
It backs up what you're saying, though, Eddie, as well, that you wouldn't question another coach's selection because you're seeing all these traits on Brian O'Driscoll as a player that, fans are not seeing, and you're spotting leadership qualities around the hotel and
and you see it, you see those moments. And there was other guys led the team that people didn't know about, I remember fellas like Simon Easterby was an excellent leader, Kevin Maggs was an excellent leader, Ron O'Gara was brilliant, and guys grow into it. Like their first year or two in camp, they're not going to be probably ready to lead, but they find their leadership feet, and they begin to feel comfortable taking on the responsibility of leading, and they talk up at training sessions, they talk up in the team room, they talk up in the huddle, and the key is when you're under your post with 2 minutes to go, and they're about to kick conversion to put you behind, who's going to talk up? That's when your leaders come in. You know, it's easy to lead a team that's winning by 20 points. Like that's not the hard bit. Hard bit is, when you're looking down the barrel of a loss and you need someone to step up to the plate and say, "Here, this is what we're going to do." That's when your leaders come into play. And the more of those you can find in your team, you see, the better. And if you look at all the great teams, they would have probably 5 or 6 of those guys threaded through it. The English team that won the World Cup, to be fair, had a phenomenal number of leaders in that group. When you think back on it. So, it's really important to have consistent success, that you have that guys with that strength of character underpinning the culture of your team. Because culturally they drive it. They drive the culture of the team. And if you don't have that culture around the team, then the things fall apart very quickly. And culture is simple stuff like discipline, like being on time, not cutting corners, concentrating at the right time, picking up after you in camp, not leaving rubbish around, putting away the kit, just discipline. If that cultural foundation is under the team and it's driven by the leaders in the team, then you can build a really good team out of that. You can really build something that's sustainable over a number of years.
That's excellent, Eddie. Brilliant insight. Do you know, Eddie, like you've both with Ireland and the States, you're coming up against different head coaches, and the stuff that you're talking about as well, where it's very similar to stuff that Eddie Jones says as well. You know, do you think there's a common trait in head coaches, even in personality types? Like when you're coming up against these and trying to, you know, I don't know what level of socialising you guys do after a test, or if you get to know each other even. But
you get to know some coaches better than others. You always probably have a beer with them, and you get to know some guys better than others because you just strike it off.
Yeah.
You know, like anything, like you meet anybody, and like fellas that I would have had a really good relationship with, and I would still have huge regard for, and only met him there last November for 10 minutes because he's so busy, with Steve Hansen, you know.
Right.
Yeah, like Steve was coaching Wales when I was with Ireland, and we really had a good relationship. We used to really enjoy each other's company after games and stuff. I got on really well with John Kerber when he was coaching Italy. So you tend to, and if the guy's around for a few years and you see each other, and you see each other sometimes when you're at another game, like if I was over watching Leinster play against the Welsh team, the chance I would bump into Steve in it. So,
yeah.
But I suppose probably the characteristics I would think that a lot of head coaches would share would be not dissimilar that you'd find in the business world. Somebody who kind of really driven to succeed, who's a really good work ethic and is very organised.
Yeah.
And after that, then it's about your knowledge of your craft, your rugby in this case. But for somebody else, could be the CEO of a widget company. I don't know, you know.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And this is so like similar traits and what have you. There'll be a lot of coaches, I guess, tuning into this, watching this. Have you got any advice for up and coming coaches, sort of what they would have to work on, what they have to do to sort of take it to that next level and get in the mix?
Yeah, there's a number of things that are important, I think, to progress as a coach. One is like learn your craft. And if you're a head coach, I remember when I was starting out, I played in the backs and I didn't know much about forwards. And what I did is I was strength and conditioning coach for Ireland back in the World Cup in '91, and I spent all my time at the forward sessions learning about you know, lineouts and scrums. I picked the brains of the props, and I used to stand scrum half of their lineouts just to learn the lineouts, you know. So try and learn. You know, you're never going to be able to coach all the game, but as a head coach, you need to know what's going on in all the game, and you need to be, you know, you need to know what's happening in each sector of the game, and it's getting more complicated now because it's so specialised. So know your craft. The other thing is being able to teach skills, being able to tell somebody what they need to do to get better. Like the hurry up and try harder technique doesn't work, you know. You've got to be able to tell somebody how to fix a problem. And that's a challenge. And that's why possibly you see a lot of teachers falling into coaching, because they've been taught how to teach.
Yeah.
That's a lot of head coaches in rugby, they've come from a teaching background to some extent. Doesn't preclude somebody who hasn't, but you do need that capacity to be able to impart information. And then you need to be very organised. Then what you do, like, you know, and the challenge for me is, no matter whether I'm coaching a club or anything, is at what level, is when the players cross the whitewash for a training session and then they leave like 90 minutes later, do they feel they've learned something? And if they have, there might be much, but you've done it, you've made them better as a player. If they haven't, you haven't done a particularly good job, you know, for whatever reason. And then I suppose the final thing is, in your dealing with people, is be very honest, you know, and honesty is hard. It's easy sometimes to tell somebody what you think they want to hear. But like, particularly when you're dropping a player, that's the worst part of the job. And all you can do is give a guy an honest explanation, and they never agree with it. And if they did, you'd probably worry about them. But, you know, you give them the honest, this is what you need to do. I know you probably don't agree with it, but take it from me. And, you know, I might be wrong here why I'm leaving you out. Because in professional rugby, you're kind of affecting their career path, you know. Yeah. You can affect their earning potential if they're whether international or not. So all that's important, but honesty underpins all that, you know. And if you give a guy an honest opinion, I've had guys come back to me after and say, look, I was really upset about that, but I appreciate you told me what you thought. You really told me what you thought. Like, I respect you were honest with me. And I think that in the long run, as a coach, it means that your players trust you if they know you're going to be honest with them. They mightn't always like what you're saying, but if they think that's really what you believe, then that's the best you can be to them, I think, you know.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's fascinating.
This is incredible insight.
Eddie, one last question now. You're not Irish coach anymore, and I know you do punditry yourself. What's it like going to these matches now? Or do you go live and watch? Can you watch it as a supporter?
It's hard because you're watching it's hard not to watch it as a coach and see what's going on? Like maybe we need to get a bit wider there, or we need to not overload the short side. You're kind of looking at all those things that you'd be sending in, which is fun,
Yeah.
And I still, even watching games on TV, I sit down with a notepad and I'll write 6 pages of notes watching a game because it's stuff that you say, geez, I wish I thought of that, or stuff, I'm glad I'll never try that. Or you see something, you go, that's not bad, but if you tweaked it, it'd be better. That kind of notes. It's hard not to watch a game with your coaching hat on. And I do admit, like when I wasn't in Paris actually, but when Ireland were driving that 41 rucks to get to the drop goal, like my heart was pounding out of my chest. Like, it's amazing. You can't. It's like I really could feel my heart. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest. And Sexton kicked that through. It's very hard to get away from that part of the game. I suppose it's if you're passionate about it. That's what kind of defines that, But I remember sitting there going I if he misses this, I mean, I was going to throw up, But your heart is pounding, and you're going to hold on a minute, I'm not actually coaching here. It's not as catastrophic for me if he doesn't miss it. But it's hard to take yourself out of the moment, when you're there, when you're watching it. It's amazing. But anyway, that's the way it is.
You're still a fan as well. Eddie, thanks so much for this chat. This has been a brilliant rugby chat for us, and to get your experience, and as I said, a little peek into your brain and the pressures and what it might be like as a head coach in the Six Nations, it's just invaluable for us.
It's been incredible. Thanks a lot for this, Eddie.
Eddie, thanks a million.
Cheers, boys. Really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.